What is happening, super fans? You're listening to Behind the Mask, the show where we chat with your favorite superhero fiction authors about the worlds and heroes they are writing. Behind the Mask is brought to you in conjunction with the amazing folks over at superherofiction.com. I'm your host, Franklin Kendrick, and today on the show, I'm very pleased to be chatting with author J.D. Cunegan. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. And I like that little intro there. I just learned the other day what that mask is actually called. I didn't, for the longest time, I didn't know what it was called, but I had to research it for something. And it's a domino mask. So learn something new every day.
Yeah. It's like all the terminology. We just know it visually from all of our time, like watching movies and reading comics. And it's like, oh, they all have names.
And then you go and then you go to write it in a bit of prose, and then you realize, oh, I actually need to know the name of this thing.
That is like something that I've run into a bunch of times. So I'm going to jump into my very first question for you. It could be the most difficult question or the easiest question, but tell us a little bit about your secret identity. When you're not a superhero in front of the keyboard, who are you?
When I'm not in front of the keyboard, I'm in front of a keyboard. My day job is in media relations in college athletics, which is interesting these days. It's hard to do media relations for college sports when there are no college sports. And I'm not sure when there will be college sports in the near future. So it's a lot of busy finishing up work, occasional press release. So even when I'm not writing, I'm writing. It's just a different form of writing. Other than that, I read a lot, obviously, because I don't think you can be a writer without reading. Mm-hmm. Some people will argue you can't. I don't buy that. And outside of anything book related, I like baseball. I like hockey. I like hockey sometimes more than others. I like it a lot better when my team is winning, and my team is not winning right now. So, hockey fans will understand. You have a love-hate relationship with hockey, and which side of the fence you're on directly correlates to how your team is doing, particularly in the postseason. And outside of writing, my big interest in life is racing. NASCAR is my poison of choice, but if it's got four wheels and a motor and I come across it on TV, I'll watch it. I really don't care what it is.
Sounds awesome. It's like well-rounded bunch of different interests that probably all fuel your imagination and all that.
It's interesting because everybody assumes I've written stories about auto racing, and other than a short story that appeared in an anthology last year, I really haven't. I just haven't come up with an idea yet that fits. I tried to fit it into one of the books I've already written, but it just works. So tabling that for the time being.
Okay. So jumping in on writing, what got you into writing in the first place, and then what steered you sort of towards focusing on writing superhero fiction?
I was always a creative child. I drew a lot, but writing didn't really show up on my radar until I got to middle school, and I discovered comic books. Some friends had come to school one day with some comic books, and I remember it very vividly. It was an issue of Uncanny X-Men. It was from the Chris Claremont, Jim Lee era. And I was just blown away by what I saw. And from that point on, I decided this is what I want to do. I want to create characters. I want to create my own stories. And for the longest time, I was gearing myself toward being the next Jim Lee, the next Michael Turner, the next Mark Silvestri. I was going to be even the next Todd McFarlane.
Okay.
I wanted to write and draw my own comic books. So graduate from middle school into high school, start creating my own original characters, which are now write in form. They originated as comic book characters. Once I got to college and I discovered that being an art student is a lot different than being an artist.
Oh, yes.
And got to I didn't want to be an artist anymore. And being an artist is not like riding a bike. You do not pick it up after a long time away and just be as good as you always were.
Oh, no.
But that you see why it's now novels instead of comic books.
Yeah, novels is a very there's different. It's still takes certain skill sets, but they're not as hard to harness. Like, you can learn and grow, and I feel like it's a little bit easier than working in like a strict visual medium.
And the good thing was when I changed out of being an art major, I switched to journalism. So I was still writing, even though the nature of what I was writing was different.
Mm-hmm.
And I got so busy with that while I was in college. I was writing for the school newspaper. I wound up broadcasting for the campus radio station because right about that same time, they reinstituted their sports program, their sports department. So that we launched a sports talk radio show that I was a host of for 3 or 4 years. We started broadcasting our men's and women's basketball games and baseball games. So between all of that courses, my fiction writing fell off for several years. I didn't touch it,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't even really think about it. But toward the end of my college days, I discovered the TV shows Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel. Friends will tell you that I was way late to the party on this. They would be right. I'm still being told I told you so to this day. I didn't watch them when they were on the air because I watched the Buffy movie when I was a kid, and I hated it. So when I found out that they were doing a TV show, I'm not going to watch that. It didn't matter how many times my friends told me, no, it's really good. You need to watch it. You need to see this. I never listened to them until the show was already off the air, and I realized, oh, okay, you were right. But what happened while I was watching those shows was I got the urge to create again. And I revisited all of the characters that I created when I was in high school. I kept what was good. I threw away what wasn't. I tweaked what I could. And for the longest time, I would start writing and then stop. Because I would get to a point where I'm, okay, I don't know with this.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly with what's now my superhero series, which is a combination of superhero and murder mystery. And the reason I mentioned murder mystery is my grandmother loves to read that genre. She'll read James Patterson, all those different writers, which makes shopping for her for Christmas really, really easy. But she also watches those shows on TV, and one of the shows she watched was Castle.
Oh yeah,
a show that I knew about because Nathan Fillion was in it, but it wasn't my genre, so I didn't really pay it a whole lot of mind until she started watching it, which meant I started watching it, and it was better than I expected it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized the lead detective character on that show, Kate Beckett, was very similar to my detective character, Jill Anderson. So it was like I found the missing ingredient for my books, and in hindsight, it was really duh. I mean, my character is a homicide cop. Why wouldn't my books be murder mysteries? I was so focused on the superhero aspect of the character that I forgot the other aspect, which, you know, the secret identity is just as important as the hero. Mm-hmm. And once I discovered that, the pieces all fell together, and I've completed Bounty, my first book. It was my National Novel Writing Month project in 2014. It published June 1, 2015, when I figured out, hey, I can publish on my own.
Yes.
And the rest, as they say, is history.
That's awesome. So pretty much within the span of like a year, you went from having a book, like you went from having a draft to having your book up for sale and out in the world, which is basically how a lot of writers in the genre do it now, because indie is really the way to go for superhero fiction.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, when I started, when I hit publish on Bounty, I didn't even know there was a superhero genre. I was just putting out.
2015. That was like, I feel like that was like, it's not that long ago, but in like publishing world, it's like that was like a lifetime ago for the genre. I feel like, because now finally people are catching on that, hey, it's a thing. There's more stuff out there.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't think of novels or short stories when they think of superheroes.
Mm-hmm.
And I've said this on other interviews before, where I talked about the genre, where we're used to superheroes being visual,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's in comic books and graphic novels or movies and TV shows. We're so used to there being the visual element of storytelling with superheroes that sometimes we can't imagine a superhero story without that element in it. And I'll be honest, sometimes in writing superhero stories, I struggle with, I know how this would look if I were doing it on a comic book page, or if this were, Netflix backed up the Brinks truck and said, we want to make your thing a show.
Mm-hmm.
I know how I want it to look. How do I translate that look into what you see on the page, to where when you read that page, you're seeing a vague approximation of the same thing I'm seeing?
Mm-hmm.
And I think some people, this is going to sound bad because it's going to make them sound lazy, but it's totally not the way I think it. They don't want to do that work to where they provide the visual. They want the visual fed to them because that's what they're used to. That's what the genre for decades has been.
Mm-hmm.
Superman lifting the car on the cover of Action Comics #1, Christopher Reeve flying around the Earth, Michael Keaton grabbing the first bad guy on the roof, getting right in his face, saying, "I'm Batman." You see that. It's not as easy to see if you're reading a book, but as I've slowly dipped my toe into reading the genre, not just writing it, there are a lot of really good writers in this genre, and there are a lot of really good stories in this genre that I feel like are getting overlooked simply because they're either miscategorized,
Mm-hmm.
which is as systemic a problem as anything that I think Amazon contributes to, but also the perception. I can sit here and tell somebody, here's a really good superhero book that I read, and if they flip through it and there are no pictures.
Yeah, it feels like the heavy lifting for the novels is basically before they even open it. I mean, it's for all books, but like your cover needs to grab them, because that's in most cases the only visual that they're going to get of hopefully a costume, or if you can afford to have something custom designed, which a lot of people can't, because it that's real artistry right there.
And that was where I found myself behind the 8 ball when I started, because I didn't know any better.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know anybody yet who knew any better. So for me, when I published Bounty for the first time, the cover was the very last thing I did. I just picked something at random, thought, that's good enough. It took me 2 or 3 more tries before I finally got the cover for Bounty right. And fortunately, and this is where I'm so glad to be an indie author. is the community of other indie authors. One of my favorite one of my favorite authors. She doesn't write superhero stuff, but S.E. Anderson. She writes really good, lighthearted, funny sci-fi. Her Starstruck series is hilarious. It's think Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but funnier.
Okay.
She's also a cover artist, and I enjoy her work. She enjoys my work. She likes my books, so that's kind of how we connected. And once I found out that she was a cover artist and that she already liked my series, I asked her if she would do a rebrand of my covers for me, and what she did is what my covers are now. And I wish I could have done that right from the get-go. But, like I said, I didn't know any better, and I didn't know that I didn't know any better.
Mm-hmm.
So if there was
tough.
one thing, yeah.
It's like we're trying to do a million jobs, and it's like just writing the draft is sometimes like exhausting enough. Then to try to use a whole different set of your part of your brain to be like, okay, now I'm gonna focus on this cover. Like, I feel like we know what a great cover is when we're browsing for something to read for ourselves, but then really when it comes time to create our own or have somebody design it, it's like, oh no, this is not easy to put into words, or or at least in my case, I'm always like, hopefully this conveys what I want. Like, so I sympathize with the struggle. And I definitely have made some mistakes in the past on my own work. So, give me an overview of your Jill Anderson superhero series. You said it was superhero detective fiction. Give me sort of a rundown of what you said it's 5 books. What are they all about?
Well, Jill Anderson is a homicide cop in the city of Baltimore, and she's also the superhero Bounty. She's part cyborg that comes from her history in the military when she signed up to undergo an experimental procedure called Project Fusion. It's kind of Captain America Wolverine-ish, except she did it completely of her own volition, and she became a superhero when she got back from being in the army, and she got her badge with the city of Baltimore, because she saw that her badge wasn't enough. She didn't think she was doing enough good as a cop, so she decided to become a superhero on top of it, because that's what a completely normal, well-adjusted person does. And the series is essentially her balancing her double life, and the main villain of the story to this point, he won't be the main villain for much longer, is a shady billionaire by the name of David Greger, who was a lot more fun to write before 2016 than he currently is. But it's very much in the vein of Daredevil, particularly the Netflix series. I tell people all the time that the season 1 of the Daredevil Netflix series is, in terms of tone and mood and theme, exactly what I want this series to be. So if like I said, if Netflix were to ever back up the Brinks truck and decide to make a series out of it, that's sort of the template for what I would want it to be. Not quite as much Catholic angst, but very much street level superhero, not really worrying about saving the world or anything of that nature. The books have become more episodic as I've gotten. When I started the series, it was very much case of the week kind of thing. I wanted to write the series in such a way that anybody could jump in at any point and not feel lost.
Mm-hmm.
But from book 3, which was Behind the Badge, on, things have gotten much more episodic, whereas one book is immediately leading into the other, into the next, and so on. And I just released the 5th book in the series, Betrayal, this past April. General consensus is it's the most intense and most emotional one of the series yet, which that was the point. So good. And I'm currently writing book 6 in the series called Bitter End, which will wrap up the current villain. And if all goes according to plan, that book should be out before the end of the calendar year. But, 2020 being what it is,
Yeah,
I can't make
it's
any promises yet.
2020. You gotta roll with the punches and see what happens, basically. So as far as the world of your books, is it set in our real world, or is it like a fictionalized version, or a fictional version of whatever you have come up with in your mind?
It's our world, slightly fictionalized. So when you, if you pick up the series, you're not going to see the real life people who are in charge being in charge. Those are all fictional characters. But it is this world. It is current day Baltimore, Maryland. There are no overt political references, with the possible exception of book 3, Behind the Badge, but that's less a political thing as much as the story was inspired by the ongoing epidemic of police violence these last several years. Honestly, going back much farther than that, but the last several years, because we now have we all have cameras on us and everybody sees everything on social media anymore. So that book was just an instance of me wanting to know how Jill would react in a situation like that. Where she stumbles upon a murder victim and finds out it was her own coworkers who killed them.
Oh my gosh.
I wanted to see how she would handle that, and for the most part, how I thought she would, except for the very end of the book, when she surprised the hell out of me. Which I actually like when my characters do that, because I figure if they're surprising me, then they're probably surprising my readers too.
Yeah.
And on in that same vein, with everything that's gone on the last couple months in terms of police violence and all that, it's I don't want to say I'm reevaluating my books, because that's not the accurate way to put it, but I feel like the world I've set up for Jill and the kind of character Jill is, I feel like she would have something to say about what's going on these days in terms of policing, beyond just, hey, cops shouldn't kill people. Because I feel like a lot of reasonable people could agree with that statement. I feel like when talking to reasonable people, the sentence "cops should not kill people" is something that a lot of people, that we can all agree on. It's some of the minutia behind that where I think some of the messaging gets lost. And while I try not to make fiction overtly political. I also think that art in general can become so because it's just a reflection of the world that artist lives in. So it's not necessarily where I sit down and I'm looking to make a certain point,
Mm-hmm.
but taking in the world in which I live, I would be remiss if that didn't have some effect on the character in the series going forward, because I do think a lot of our perceptions about what the police are and what they do is informed in some part on the fiction that we consume
Mm-hmm.
involving police and even federal law enforcement, like shows that center around FBI agents, or how the CBS popular show for the last 10,000 years has been
Yes.
naval criminal investigative. So I think some of what we think police are comes from things like that, and I think, as someone who writes that sort of fiction, at least in part, it's a good chance to examine that, particularly when I have a character whose day job is to uphold the law, but then her side gig breaks the law.
Mm-hmm.
So I think she's uniquely angled to look at that scenario, particularly as the series goes on, and I start branching out into, there is more than one superhero in this world, and what does that mean for the world, and what does that mean for Jill as a character?
Mm-hmm.
Because as of right now, she's the only superhero in this fiction I've created. But as the series goes on beyond book 6, I'm gonna start adding more elements of, here are some more superheroes, some who are a lot like you, some who are nothing like you, and what does that mean going forward?
Definitely. So, what if for her powers? Does Because you say there's going to be hopefully more heroes. How, if it's not spoilerific or like plot essential information, how does she get her abilities? What abilities does she have?
It's that Project Fusion experiment that I mentioned earlier.
Oh yes,
Her entire, yeah, her entire skeleton is titanium. Um, I don't know if you've seen the cover for the first book, Bounty, but she's got,
yes.
where the left side of her face is basically a silver eye plate with the bionic eye. I first created her when I was in high school, and Mortal Kombat was huge back then, so I basically ripped it off from Kano.
Oh my gosh, yes.
But I thought it was I thought it was a good look for her, and I wanted, because so many female superheroes have this supermodel quality to
Hmm.
them, and I didn't want Jill to have that. So having that on her face is part of that. On top of her having a costume that covers her from head to toe, and is practical instead of fashionable. I make it a point to tell my readers, she's not wearing heels, she's wearing combat boots. She's got military grade Kevlar armor on under her suit,
Hmm.
because even though her bow, she is not.
Hmm.
A point I've made several times throughout the series. I've thrown her out of buildings. I've shot her.
The things
I,
that they go
I
through.
put her through a lot, and part of the reason part of the reason I do that is to show that, yes, she does have all these enhancements. She has super strength. She has increased agility. She has a supercomputer embedded in her brain that she sometimes uses when solving murders, which her partner on the force calls cheating. But if you've got it, use it.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to show that she's not indestructible. She's not Wolverine.
Mm-hmm.
They may share some similarities in terms of their backstory and what happened to give them their powers, but yeah, it's not like she can drive around in a Winnebago not wearing her seatbelt, get flung from the windshield, and 2 minutes later she gets right back up and everything's fine.
Yeah.
No, she can get hurt. She can get seriously hurt, but um, and it's a constant balancing act for me, trying to show that she is immensely powerful while at the same time not making her too powerful,
Mm-hmm.
because it's still a very grounded series. It's still a very ground level series, and I feel like that her ability.
Absolutely. It's like what once the heroes are like totally invincible, I feel like it becomes somewhat boring for the reader because you know that whatever they get thrown into, they're just gonna crawl out of unscathed. But then also from the writing standpoint, I mean, it makes it less uh, easy. And well, I guess yeah, it makes it more difficult to make an interesting villain because your villain all of a sudden has to be totally outrageous to top the invincible hero.
And in my case, where villain is very much just a normal person,
Mhm,
um, who is a couple decades her senior.
mhm.
So if she were to start beating up on him, that's incredibly lopsided.
Yes,
So in Betrayal, I do have a plot twist that sort of addresses that. I can't say too much more than that because then that gets into spoiler territory, and that's that shock that I really want the reader to find for themselves. But the first four books, it's more of an intellectual jousting match,
mhm.
Jill and David, simply because physically it's such a mismatch that it would be boring to write and it would be unsatisfying to read. Um,
Definitely. It's like
which is why there are other villains at play out.
they just haven't emerged. They're waiting. They're biding their time. There's always more villains.
And sometimes the villain is related to the main villain, and sometimes they're just some random Yahoo who muck things up.
So I guess I'll jump into my because you were talking earlier about how art your basically your novels, which is your art, it kind of is commenting on our real world in a way, and sort of your characters are kind of reacting to things that we're all sort of suffering through and seeing on our news and everything. But what I know those are all like heavy topics, but what are some other things that sort of inspire your writing of superhero detective fiction, which I feel like is a, a branch of the genre that I haven't seen a whole lot of.
It's the fact that superheroes are what got me into writing in the first place. That's the genre where I've always felt most at home.
Mm-hmm.
Both as a consumer of stories and a creator of them. So and I can sit here and argue to you that, you know, Buffy the Vampire Slayer is a superhero story.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's apocalyptic and all that, but she's also a superhero.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think the superhero motif is so ubiquitous today with the popularity of comic book movies and comic book TV shows. It's a genre that you can pair nicely with other genres. Whether it's, I mean, even if you look at the MCU, you see this perfectly, because you compare the superhero genre with a political thriller, and you get Captain America: The Winter Soldier. You pair it with science fiction, you get, on one hand, you get Iron Man,
Mm-hmm.
on another hand, you get Guardians of the Galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
Spy thriller, you probably get something a lot like Black Widow. So the superhero genre can marry itself to virtually any genre you want. You can write a superhero romance story. You can write. I'm sure somebody has already cornered the superhero erotica market.
Oh, most
Good
likely.
for them if they have. You can do superhero apocalyptic
Mm-hmm.
fantasy. It, it's 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 genre unto itself, and at the same time, it's a genre that you can pair with anybody else, because and I think this is why the superhero genre is as popular as it is overall
Mm-hmm.
across all forms of media. Is, you know, we've mentioned a couple times on this interview about the state of the world,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of the things that are wrong with the world are things you and I cannot fix.
Because they're just so it's such large
Not
issues.
on our own,
Mm-hmm.
but superheroes can do that.
Yes.
Superman can literally save the entire planet. We've seen, you know, the Avengers save New York City from a, right, and superheroes can tackle the big issues that you and I
Mm-hmm.
can't. And there's something about living vicariously through that, and something reassuring about, yes, there are big, bad, scary things out there, but there are also big, good things that are the big, bad, scary things.
Absolutely.
And that's not always true in the real world. So for there to be fiction that shows you, yes, there are heroes like this in the world, you know, Alien Invasion called the Green Lanterns. The Green Lanterns are built specifically for outer space stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I think ultimately that's what drew me to the superhero genre. That's what drew me to the superhero genre in the first place, as a reader and as a viewer, and why I'm now a creator in that genre.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, you know, here I am, almost 40 years old. Some people will tell you you're going to outgrow comic books and all that stuff, but the older I get, and nobody says it, is the I think that makes superheroes more important.
Absolutely. It's something that I mean, kids can read it and enjoy it, but also it's multi-layered, so it's not on the surface, I feel like for someone who is like an outsider to the genre, it just looks like, yeah, it's people in capes jumping around with flashy explosions, but you can tell some really deep philosophical stories with these types of characters, and definitely, hopefully, you know, send something out into the world that will make a good difference and a good influence on what the unrest that we all experience, because they are kind of heroes that embody like a movement that we wish we could do on our own, but we just cannot physically, like you said, on our own fix the problem ourselves. So like vicariously through these heroes, writing them and reading them, we can get the sort of satisfaction of seeing like, yes, change can come, and there are forces of good out there that we might not see them all the time, but they are out there.
And obviously, the first and foremost, whatever you create, whatever you needs to be entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not entertaining, nothing you do matters. But I think in the process of entertaining your audience, you can also make these bigger, greater, broader points that we've been discussing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, speaking of entertainment, first and foremost, as we write our books, we want to be entertained ourselves. My next question for you is, if you have, I think you sort of mentioned something earlier, do you have a particular plot line that you have come up with that surprised you, or do you have a favorite twist that you have come up with? And you don't have to go into super great detail if it's a spoiler, but if you could, broad strokes, for any readers out there, what is a twist or a plot that you thought, oh, that is fun, and I can't believe that just came out of my fingers through the keyboard?
There's two of them, and I've briefly mentioned them both. One was in Behind the Badge, book 3. Trying to think of a way to describe it to where I'm not spoiling it. It plays on the genre trope of the secret identity,
Mm-hmm.
and who knows who Jill really is, and all that, because it, in a way, the secret identity is an old-fashioned trope that I don't necessarily think it works today,
Mm-hmm.
simply because of how ubiquitous social media and all that stuff is. I think it would be a lot harder for someone to have a double life like that. I feel like in today's world, somebody would have their phone out and we would eventually figure out that Bruce Wayne is Batman.
Oh yeah, with the amount of people that become fans of somebody,
so
somebody would have
there's
found
a
it
twist in Behind the Badge where I play with the secret identity trope, and then and in Betrayal, the book that just came out, the 5th book in the series, I mentioned there's a twist involving David Gregor, the villain, which makes a physical confrontation between him and Jill more likely, and more to where I can write it, and it's not just a case of her beating the hell out of an old man.
Yes, as fun as it sounds. I'm nearing the end of my questions. My next question for you is, you have 5 books out and you say you have plans for more. Do you have a projection of how many you would like to do in the series?
At least 10. Um, I don't have an end point for the series. If I could be writing these books for the rest of my life, that'd be great. It'd become like, James Patterson has his Alex Cross books, this is a weird example, but Richard Castle with the Nikki Heat books,
Mhm.
They're still publishing those, even though Castle's been off the air for a couple years now. I guess they've got contracts they need to fulfill or whatnot, but one of those series that doesn't truly have an endpoint. I have stories mapped out through at least book 10.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have other projects that I'm working on that are non-series, non-Jill Anderson, non-superhero stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I do have an urban fantasy book out there called Natna that's completely unrelated. Not super. He's a superhero. You could argue Buffy's a superhero. The series itself, I am planned out book 10.
Okay, so roughly you're at the halfway mark,
more or less.
More or less. I can always, as I know from my reading, because I love all of it, but it can always continue on. Like it, unless you literally, even if you literally kill your hero, they can always come back if you really want.
Death means nothing in the world of superheroes.
It really doesn't. It's like, Wolverine, I'll see you in 6 months.
Yeah, and they even marketed, hey, we're going to kill this guy. It won't last.
Oh my gosh, the amount of times that when I first got into reading comics, I was duped, I think maybe 2 or 3 times with the whole death of so and so, you'll never see them again. And then a year later, it's like, here's the issue number 1. And I'm like, oh man, and you're like, it's hard to know what to feel as a reader when that happens, because on the one hand, you put all your emotion into that character dying and being sad, and then you're happy to see them return because you love them, but then you also think, oh my gosh, I was just so manipulated by watching them die and crying. I don't know what to think.
Like I want to know who read Death of Superman and honestly 100% believed that he was really gone forever and was never coming back.
I don't know.
Because if you believe that, oceanfront property in Arizona to sell you.
You heard it here, everybody. Death is not the end for the heroes or even the villains. So you never know what to expect. So hopefully, if you've made it to book 5 in the series, do not worry. There will be more to come.
Well, and the beauty is I haven't had any major character deaths yet. There will be a couple coming in later books.
Mm-hmm.
And the plan right now is for the characters I'm going to kill to stay dead. Because I would like for death to have some meaning in this universe.
Mm-hmm. It's one of the like luxuries. I mean, it's kind of funny to call it that, but it is one of the luxuries as like writers that we have, where we're not beholden to like a corporate board of people that are selling t-shirts of our characters. Like, as exciting as that would be, it's kind of nice to, when you write a giant epic plot thread that ends up like that, it actually is meaningful from both a writing standpoint and a reading standpoint.
And that's one of the reasons I'm published, because that the sort of control that gives me. I answer to anybody when I'm writing these books. I answer to myself. I answer to the characters, mm-hmm. and to some degree, answer to them. But I'm not answering to round table of people who think they know better than me what's good for characters.
Mm-hmm. I've got two basically two questions remaining. One of them you kind of answered, I think, but if someone is brand new to your series, I know you said that they started off sort of episodic, but would you suggest that they start like strictly with book one and work their way forward, or where should they begin with your series?
Absolutely, book one and work their way forward. And the beauty of it is, book one is 99 cents. So if you want to get in on the Jill Anderson series, pick up Bounty. It's $1. It'll be more if you want the paperback, but or if you want to weigh into the series and you're not keen on spending money, because I understand how difficult it can be for some people right now. If you go to my website, jdcuneganbooks.com, and you click on the subscribe to my newsletter link and you sign up for my newsletter, you will get a free novella called Boundless. That is a prequel novella to Bounty. It's not something you have to read to understand the series, but it's a good taste of the series. It's a really quick, short way in. It's about the first night where she became Bounty.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're looking for the series proper, go with the first book. Go with Bounty. It's just $1. And then if you like what you read, the other 4 books in the series so far, 2 is Blood Ties. Book 3 is Behind the Badge. You'll like this. Book 4 is Behind the Mask, and book 5 is Betrayal.
So there you have it, everybody. Definitely, I'm a fan of the prequel novellas. I'm not gonna lie. So you really, if you're looking for some escapism, which I feel like we all are right now, like you have really no barriers. Go sign up, download it to your phone, or if you're me and you have like a zillion tablets, download it to your iPad and also to your Kindle.
All you have to do is sign up for my newsletter. I try not to send too many letters out, maybe 2 a month top. But you sign up for my newsletter, you get a free dollar. And honestly, what's better than free?
Free is amazing. So my final question is kind of like an overall for readers that are looking to find your work and also find you online. Where can they look you up? Where can they check out all your stuff?
My website is jdcuneganbook.com. You can find me on Twitter at jd_Cunegan. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram at jdcunegan. My work is available on Kindle, Nook, Kobo, Apple iBooks. As of last week, my work is now on Smashwords.
Oh,
and
nice.
If you prefer the act of holding a physical book in your hand, paperbacks are available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble's website, or you can buy them from me directly. And if you buy them from me directly,
it's like a lost art is the, well, not in a way, it sort of is. The physical books. I feel like I've moved so far away from them, but it's like really, if it's signed and you can hold it, it's like such an experience.
It is, but you're right. Literally 98% of my sales are ebooks.
Mm-hmm. It's just so easy to just click and buy now. But if you have the space and you like physical things, definitely look them up. They do still make them, and that's my PSA on physical books, which I have way too many of.
Yeah, I've run out of shelf space and have no more room to put more shelf.
It's like one of the best problems to have, because you're surrounded by amazing stuff that you're just like, there's so many worlds I can be in right now. This is just like, compared to even like 100 years ago, it's such like an amazing problem to have. I guess I'm going to wrap this one up. Just want to thank you so much for being on, and I'll do my little end spiel.
Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. So I'll wrap this episode up, guys. If you like the podcast, wherever you're listening, just be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Make sure you give us a like and let us know what you think by commenting. The only thing I ask is that if you discuss spoilers in your comments, just leave a warning so people like me who scroll through the comments can just scroll through if we haven't read book 3 or book 5. So as always, everybody, just want to thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate you all, whether you're new or old to the podcast, and I will see you next time.